Welcome everybody to this week's Topics in Tech. And we've introduced ourselves before we started recording. So I'll introduce Chris and John, who are joining us from the Microsoft Innovation Center in Burlington. Or they're joining us from somewhere else, but that's where I would normally see them. They're joining us from wherever home is for them. And they're both Bentley alum. And it's great to have them virtually with us, even though we can't visit them in person in Burlington, but maybe next year. So welcome back, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks. Appreciate you having us.
Yes, thanks, Mark.
Awesome. JD, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. Really, Chris and I excited to join in and have a discussion with you guys. As Mark pointed out, in the past years, we've typically hosted all of you up to our customer facility in Burlington. And hopefully in the near future, we can do that. But for today, what Chris and I are prepared to do is give you a little insight into who we are, above and beyond just a Bentley alum and a Microsoft employee, a little bit about our careers. We'll talk a little bit about Microsoft, some of the themes that we see across both what we're doing internally and then what we see across our customers. And then talk about careers and potentially how we can help you think through a career in tech, potentially a career in Microsoft. We're always looking for good people, and have a Q&A session. Chris and I are very, open to, at least I'll speak for myself, want an interactive session, right? So I'd rather not just be presenting, but you stop us, ask questions. Let's make this a very interactive session. Mark's seen us before do this. We fuel off your questions, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, and do appreciate having your video on as well. If you see me looking to the right, that's where I'm seeing all of your smiling faces. So I am looking at you. I'm not watching the news or a sports game or something like that.
So before I begin about us, I always like to ask, like, when you guys think about Microsoft, what comes to mind? Like, what do you think Microsoft represents, or what like word association? I say Microsoft. What do you say?
Well, I've actually go ahead.
I was gonna go with basically Microsoft, and you can't like think of Microsoft without saying Windows as well.
Okay.
I think that I agree with Sam, especially during that age, during Bill Gates and everything. But after the new CEO, I feel like Microsoft changed more towards a database or a platform where other companies use. So that includes Office, Azure, and all those different sectors.
I've been lucky enough to be around Bentley long enough where I got to go on one of the Microsoft tours of the Innovation Center when I was a freshman with Mark.
Okay.
And so that opportunity was really fascinating to learn about the innovation going on inside Microsoft. So ever since then, I've kind of thought of it as innovation.
Very good. And that's what we hope to do today, right? Is expand your view of Microsoft. The comment about our previous CEO versus Steve Ballmer as we transition into Satya Nadella has really changed the culture. And Chris and I will talk about that and the impact it has both internally for both of us, but also externally out to our customers and the world in general. So a little bit about myself. So I'm very familiar with the Bentley environment. I'm not only an alum, so from an education standpoint, I say I went to 2 BCs because when I went to school, I went to Boston College for accounting, and then realized I didn't really like accounting, so I switched over quickly to computer science. And then after that, I got my master's from Bentley College at the time in computer information systems. You guys can do the math, so you can figure out it was a while ago when I did that, when you see some of my career, but I found that it set me up for a very successful career as far as those 2 things and the information I learned at Bentley. I'm also, if you look on the right side, a parent of My son went to Bentley and graduated in 14. And he's now at Wellington doing investment research for them. So very familiar with that. I'm on campus all the time. I work with the career development. So if you guys have gone through CD 101, I taught that a couple of years ago. As you notice, I put my strengths up here because I'm a big believer in Strength Finder. So hopefully all of you have gone through that program. And as I talk about my career and some of my personal interests, I think you'll see that they map back to my strengths. I mean, there's a real correlation there. From a career standpoint, I started my career in a very technical projection. I was a system engineer working for a company called Lotus Development in Cambridge. I put 14 years at IBM. A lot of that was at Lotus because Lotus got acquired by IBM. But I spent about 3 or 4 years as a networking specialist, really in the technical bowels of networks, and not what you think of today. I was running cable all over the place. And Mark and Chris can probably attest to what that probably looked like. And what happened was I started getting pulled out into the field because of my knowledge and brought into the sales environment. And I started thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And I really enjoyed being in front of customers, trying to understand their business initiatives and align the technology to that. So I veered off and went to sales probably, my 5th year at Lotus, and I've never looked back. One of my interesting stints that you'll see in this sports marketing manager, when IBM acquired Lotus, I sort of created my own job where I was integrating Lotus into all the IBM sports sponsorships. So whether it was the Olympics, the US Open, the Masters, the NBA and NHL. And the key to that, though, was I was aligning the technology to the experience for those events, whether it was the production on the websites, the experience. And this is, 20, 25 years ago, the experiences were nothing like what we all experience today. So that was really the initiation of the technology for those experiences. I went back into sales for a couple of years, and then I jumped out in the 2001 to do some startups around sports and technology. And they were really just garage level, 4 of us in a garage doing things, building out community area websites and things like that. I realized, and that's, if anybody knows the history of the internet, that's when things sort of fell apart. And I went back into technology. I actually went back to IBM for a year and then came over to Microsoft for the last 15 years, where I've been around our productivity offerings, things like M365, if anybody, I think Bentley uses all of these technologies. So working with our customers on that. At one stint, I was actually a competitive sales specialist. So I was working with our sales teams across the country, making sure they understand the tactics of our competition and helping them strategize and think through how they could better address the customer needs. I've spent some time working with our business partners. So Microsoft, as we'll probably talk about throughout the session, we have a huge ecosystem of partners that help us deliver solutions to our customers. And they're everyone from organizations that actually host our technologies to those that help customers implement it and gain value, to some that may be in vertical areas. So now I'm currently in the health and life science. We have partners that work with healthcare providers, healthcare insurance companies that know those industry solutions and help take our technologies and apply it to those areas. Outside of work, I do a lot of coaching, either in a career side. I've coached sports for 15, 16 years around basketball and lacrosse. I've been a ski instructor for the last 7, and do volunteer work with the Boys and Girls Club, and also coach a Special Olympic ski team that we're gearing up for an event in a week and a half. So it's pretty exciting. So that's who I am. Hopefully throughout this session, we'll be able to talk, and if you have questions about that, quote, my journey, it wasn't necessarily a straight line, but I've been able to move about and find some real things that I found rewarding in working with customers and things like that. So I'll
Cool.
turn it over to my partner in crime, Chris.
Awesome. So thanks. So again, my name's Chris Bortlik. I'm a principal technical architect at the Microsoft Technology Center, normally in Burlington, Mass. I'm currently coming to you from my house and have been working remotely for the past year. My journey somewhat similar to John. My undergrad was in computer science, so I started off a little bit more technical directly out of high school and did computer science. Actually, if you look at the dates kind of overlapping, actually got an internship, a co-op program while I was actually after I got my associates, so between my sophomore and junior year, which was really a key thing because it let me test and validate while I was in school that I actually liked what I was doing. And more importantly, I actually got a couple of years of real world experience, which helped me financially. I was paying for my own schooling and actually was able to get my employer to help pay for the rest of my bachelor's degree. And since I was in Waltham, then went to Bentley, at the time, Bentley College as well, to get my master's while I was working. So did my MBA and my MAS at night while I was working at FM Global, which is formerly Arkwright Mutual Insurance over on Wyman Street in Waltham. Is kind of how I got connected in with Bentley. Like John, around 2000, I decided to try other things. Besides getting married to my wife, I decided to leave the safety of a big company and try a bit of a smaller company around the time of the internet boom back in 2000, and actually went to a startup and was the CTO for a startup for about 6 months until September 11th hit, and they actually got lost funding and actually pulled the funding on our company during what happened in the aftermath of 9/11. So I was getting married, starting to have kids. You can see my wife and our 4 daughters. I have a 16-year-old in high school, a 13-year-old in 8th grade, and twins that are 9-year-olds. This was back when we could travel about 18 months ago, and we got to visit Hawaii, which is behind me. I earned a sabbatical from Microsoft and got to take my wife and our kids away for a little bit of time. We also celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary around that time. But the nice thing was, I went back into a big company. I went back into FM Global after all that happened, and went back from being a manager back to a more technical role, actually being a lead architect for one of the solutions. Then went over to John Hancock, went through the merger and acquisition of John Hancock into Manulife. And while I was in there, I was actually working a lot with Microsoft technologies, things like ASP.NET and SharePoint, which is actually still around. And at the time, I had a person in a similar role to what I am in now say, have you ever thought about leaving your company? Have you thought about going to a company like Microsoft? And I said, I've always, I think Cheryl, you said, I've always thought about Microsoft as a dream job, but I never felt like I necessarily had the pedigree, the background, whatever, to work at Microsoft. I never even thought about it. It's that imposter syndrome that I always kind of had about myself of, I didn't come from that background. I didn't necessarily, go to what I consider to be an Ivy League computer science school, going to Wentworth, which is a smaller school in Boston, and really, didn't think I could work at Microsoft. And this colleague of mine who I actually went out and actually wrote 2 books with him on SharePoint and ended up being on his board of directors for a company he started, really pushed me to leave my comfort zone and actually, try Microsoft. So my journey at Microsoft and really my career, Microsoft does a lot around career development, and I've been fortunate to be part of some career advisory boards. Really started off, like I said, with computer science and being a software developer, writing COBOL applications, writing things with C++, trying things as I got my MBA, like being an IT project manager, just to see if I liked it or not. Realizing that I wanted to do that, and then going out to the startup. But then realizing, kind of going back and forth between the business side of IT and the technical side of things, and going back to being an architect, getting some exposure in public speaking, in writing, by doing nonprofit boards, joining alumni boards and getting experiences, which then drove me back to being a manager again. But ultimately, when I came to Microsoft, joining in a role doing technical sales, which I did for about 8 years, and then joining the Technology Center 5 years ago as a technical architect. And now actually going back into board work, but this time in for-profit boards and joining boards of integrated system vendors, people that are building products on the Microsoft platform. And I put that out there because when I was in school about 21 years or so ago, I had a very linear view. I thought that I had to go from here to here to here. And when I was in my 20s, I wanted to be a CIO. And by the time I was 26, I was a CTO. And then I was like, well, I don't really like doing this. I really miss being hands-on. I miss certain aspects. So it's okay as you go through your career to try new things, try different companies, try different roles. And ultimately, I've landed in a role that I really, really love at Microsoft and I'm really passionate about, partly because of the role, but also the culture, which John's going to talk about. And really, I love working for a company that requires us to have what our CEO calls technical intensity, where we expect Microsoft employees, and to some degree, our partners, our customers, our industry, to want to be continuous learners and really have that growth mindset. So I want to put that out there, that even though I left school over 20 years ago, I'm always learning and I'm always trying to learn. And if I wasn't learning, I don't think I'd be happy. And that's really what's driven me in my career. So John, do you want to talk a bit about us and kind of our mission and our culture?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. And I think you started talking about it going through your introduction. So, the mission here at Microsoft, as Chris has brought up, is in empowering every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. But one of the big differences is, as we started to talk about earlier on, it was when Satya Nadella, our current CEO, came in, he sort of really started thinking about how we could approach this differently. And I think there was a comment made around partnerships and things like that. Chris and I go back when I was in the compete role. Some of the partnerships that we have today with, some of the big tech companies, but even some smaller like Apple and that, were unheard of. The suggestion that we're a Windows shop was probably true 8 to 10 years ago when we were thinking about that and how we competed. But now with this growth mindset, it's really how do we help bring solutions, however we do it, whether we build them ourselves or we jointly partner with some partners that, we never have thought we might have done that before, to bring the right solutions to allow and to support this mission. The growth mindset goes across everything we do. So it's constant learning. The idea of tech intensity pervades everything. So I'm a frontline. I didn't really get into my role, but my role currently is, we call it solution specialist in our health and life science customer. So I am the person that thinks about how we can land the end user experience within the healthcare industry. So it's the nurses on the floor, the doctors, the administration in a hospital. It's the administration, corporate people within an insurance company. It might be the R&D people in a pharmaceutical company. So we're landing those solutions in there. I'm constantly learning about what they do and how we can help them, drive better results. And the idea of a growth mindset is, I'm not sure if there's a book, Growth Mindset, but that we actually use as our playbook. It really thinks about, you've got to take chances. You want to be, for us, is being customer obsessed, but it's okay to try things and grow. And even if they aren't successful, learn from those experiences so that you take it to your next experience. So that's one of the critical things here. In tech, when we talk about tech intensity, like Chris and I were talking as we were getting ready for this call, everything we do has probably a technical aspect to it in our day-to-day lives now. When I think about, as the group on this call go into the workforce, you're going to bring a whole different set of perceptions and views into what things should be. And most of those things have a technical aspect to it. My son, who's at Wellington, he got a finance degree at Bentley, but he talks about learning Python and working with data analytics all the time with me, because that helps him do his job. So that idea of tech intensity, goes everywhere. So the fact that, you're on this call, you work for folks with Mark and the CIS sandbox, I think will help you no matter if you go into a IS type role or any role in an organization. Everybody I talk to has to think a little bit about how technology can help them do things better. So on that, one other thing I'll point out, I don't know if that the team was aware, but about a year ago, I think it was last July, we came out with Brad Smith, our president, announced a thing called global skilling. where we are actually trying to up the level of technical awareness, technical skills across the globe. I mean, it's a huge, idea, but all of us as Microsoft employees try to do a little piece of that. Whether it's having conversations like this, is I mentor within Microsoft as well as externally to help people think about what those technical experiences might be. So if you have a chance, you can look up our global skilling. It's tied to things like GitHub, LinkedIn, and other properties. And it's really something that right from the top of the organization on down is supported and thought to be very strategic for all of us. Chris, I think you're going to go to the next slide. Some of the things we think about is how technology can impact, and we don't have time. Like, I don't know who said they had come to the MTC, but you probably saw some of these videos. But these are 3 examples that came out of, we have a hackathon culture. I don't know, is it annual or semi-annual, Chris, that we do hackathons?
Yeah, I mean, it's a formal one, once a year in the summer. We call it our 1 week hack. And the cool thing is that historically it's been internal to Microsoft. Last summer, we actually started to do hackathons externally, even with COVID. So I actually was on a hackathon project with Easter Seals, and we were working with people trying to solve technology challenges for Easter Seals clients, as they call them. And the really neat thing is we actually had a person, this person's name is Tim, and we were actually trying to solve a problem for Tim, which was really, really neat to put a specific hack against what we call AI for good and some of the other things we're doing against a specific person in trying to solve for a certain person. So it's something we do every year, but we just started to do it externally with Easter Seals, and Akamai was another one that we worked on around sustainability. So it's once a year, but it's not just within the company anymore.
So the one that you all may have seen, how many of you saw the Xbox ad? I think it was last Christmas season with the boy with the disability, that we have a new controller to help them experience, because we never, if you think about, you always just thought anybody can use an Xbox controller, but people with mobile disabilities and that couldn't necessarily do that. So there was actually, that was a result of a hackathon, that solution and that new experience to allow people with disabilities to be able to participate equally with anybody that has what we call a traditional Xbox controller. The Seeing AI is one of our engineers is blind, and actually through a hackathon built a set of glasses with capabilities in it that would allow him to perceive the environment around him, and using AI be able to understand who he might be talking to and whether they were smiling or frowning, and provide that feedback that a blind person may not be able to get, that all of us take for granted. So some really impactful things that have come out of these hackathons. And as Chris said, it goes across the organization. So this isn't just developers doing this. This is people from all different facets of the organization. It could be from finance, from support, from sales, from as he points out, externally, to provide some different viewpoints on helping us think through what those solutions might look like. So it's a pretty cool experience. We always laugh at this quote by Satya, but as we talk about joining Microsoft, I've got a funny story, but when I joined Microsoft, if any of you are baseball fans, I was at IBM and Lotus, and we viewed Microsoft as the #1 competitor. So when I went out to Redmond, through my interviews, I wore a blue and white striped shirt. And being a Red Sox fan, my tagline there was, I always wanted to feel what it would be like playing in Yankee Stadium when I interviewed with those people, right? But the idea was, you think, oh, Microsoft is cool and all this. Well, the really DNA here is to try to help others be cool, right? To help others be successful, to help drive solutions. If you go back to our mission, if we're the only ones that are cool, we're not doing our jobs, right? If we're making people successful, in their organizations having impact across the things that we've been talking about, then they're the cool ones in the equation. And that makes us feel, really good about what we're doing. And that comes right from Satya.
Cool. So I think talking about that, we'll kind of talk a bit about our strategy as a platform company. I think somebody brought up they've done some work with things like Microsoft Azure, and certainly have heard about the Microsoft Cloud. That's a key part of our company. If you think back when certainly Bill Gates ran the company, certainly the goal and the mission at the time was a PC on every home and every desk, which was very focused on Microsoft back in the 70s. But you think about how Windows took off, it was by being a platform. Right, is by building an operating system that enabled people to use different devices to build applications and services. Some of them were Microsoft applications like Microsoft Office, but others were other products like WordPerfect and Lotus Notes and other things that actually ran on top of Microsoft and Windows as a platform. So if you think about Microsoft's current strategy, it's really focused around what we call the intelligent cloud in the intelligent edge. So Azure, which is the base of the Microsoft Cloud, actually is larger in terms of global footprint in cloud and compute storage than Amazon and Google combined. And that's a significant financial investment we've had to make in order to build out that cloud footprint. But we realize that there are a number of customers that don't just want things running in the Microsoft Cloud in our data center, that they also want things to run on the edge. We call edge computing. Think about places where you might have low or no bandwidth, connected scenarios, disconnected scenarios. We're doing things with space. So you may not have a great connection when you're up in space. You may not have a great connection when you're on a submarine and you're underwater. So we have to think about not just what services can run in the cloud, but also what things can run on the edge. And the edge could be a computing device, such as a PC or a laptop or something. It could be a wearable device, like my Apple Watch, right? Or any other piece of equipment that I'm using with IoT. So I'm going to show you a little bit of some of the things that we're working on related to our broad strategy, but really nowadays we're really focused around being a cloud computing platform. And really over the last year, you think about what's happened with COVID. Certainly most of us have had to work differently, right? Mark's had to adjust his curriculum and his program has had to adapt to being in person with everyone in the classroom, to some students are in the classroom, some students are remote. And we really believe as an industry that what we've seen over the last year is going to drive long-term systemic change. And really what's empowering that change is the cloud. And it's the ability to have ubiquitous computing anywhere. So we're going to see, even as people get back to normal, and it will happen at some point, we will be in person. You will be coming back to the technology center. You will be visiting us and taking a bus, and we'll give you ice cream and drinks and all the perks that come with visiting the center. But there are going to be some portion of people that are always going to be remote. And it's opening up new opportunities for learning, things like conferences. Microsoft's Ignite conference is happening this week for free. It used to be an in-person event that everyone had to pay to go to. We're running that whole thing remote. We're running it globally because some people still may not have the ability or the desire or the budget to travel. So really just think about how the pandemic hasn't just affected us and our families and our learning experience. Really think about the long-term systemic impact that we're going to see from this. So again, Microsoft Azure is really, as I mentioned, the world's computer. All of the Microsoft products and services are now built on top of Azure. And I mentioned the global nature of the data centers, the compute and storage that's there. And that's important because it allows us to bring the compute power closest to where our customers are. It also enables us to deal with the unique regulatory and compliance regulations around data residency. Again, we're based here in the US, but a lot of our customers might be based elsewhere. We might have people that have operations in Germany or China, or even government customers in the United States that have very specific security, compliance, and privacy requirements. So it's been a core thing to allow us to support security, compliance, data residency requirements across the globe for our customers and the government agencies that we support. Microsoft won about a year ago a very important contract from the US government called the JEDI contract. It was something that we're very, very proud of. And it's a case where the US government is betting on the Microsoft Cloud for some of their most confidential and important workloads to actually run inside of the Microsoft data centers and the Microsoft Cloud as well. So you think about where we're innovating and where is Microsoft going and where is the industry going? Satya has been talking about really, you think about our mission. Certainly we want to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, right? It's no longer just about a PC on every home, which is very much of a Microsoft vision, but it's also no longer just thinking about organizations in people. It also extends to the planet. You think about as more and more customers are taking their operations, their servers, their data center, and they're moving them into the big three, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. They're really the three largest cloud providers that a lot of the smaller cloud services are built on top of. We have a tremendous responsibility to be better as far as how we deal with the planet itself, right? So as more and more people are moving their compute and storage to the cloud, we have more and more of a responsibility to think about how we're using that. So Microsoft's made significant announcements around our approach around sustainability. So I mentioned the hackathon we did last summer with Akamai, who's one of our large customers and partners based here in Cambridge. It was really focused around sustainability of our operations. When you think about sustainability, it's really cut up into a few places. First off is thinking about our carbon emissions and how do we design compute and storage, because we're building a lot of our own hardware that's powering our data centers. How do we think about being more efficient from a carbon footprint perspective? How do we think about leveraging in a clean and renewable way resources that are finite, such as water, such as some of our policies, and how do we advocate for change? A good example of that is Microsoft has a lot of suppliers. We can leverage our ability and our influence on the supply chain to start to influence change on some of our customers and our partners and what they do as they operate with Microsoft through the sheer nature and the size of what we're doing. And then as we're providing our platform to our customers and our partners, they're just going to get the benefits of what we're doing from an engineering perspective. Right, so I know a lot of us, again, I have 4 daughters. A lot of the things that they're concerned about are a little bit different than what I might have been thinking about when I was in high school and college, right? They have very much more of an awareness to global warming and climate change and the impact that technology and we as humans are having on the planet, and wanting to leave the planet better for the next generation, for my kids, for my kids' kids, my grandkids and all that. And we really are thinking about that. So it's not just empowering people anymore. It's also about having a sustainable planet for all of us. So you think about our sustainability journey at Microsoft, it certainly has started back around, I guess about 12 years or so ago, where we actually stated a goal. And that's a very key thing, is actually a company saying that we have a goal, because that's the first step to attaining it, is actually defining what we're trying to accomplish. And then in 2012, we started to get to a point where we're 100% carbon neutral with thinking about the carbon tax that's there. But over time, we're starting to think about how do we design and build our data centers. You think about Azure, we have multiple generations of Azure data centers that we're building that's out there. So in 2013, we actually got to the point where we started to deploy smart buildings. And these smart buildings that we're doing is not just things we're doing for Microsoft, it's then technology that we can leverage with our customers, with our partners, as they're building their data centers, as they're building smart hospitals, smart buildings, smart vehicles, and other things that are based on IoT and that intelligent edge. It's then again looking at how we deal with renewable energy. So again, trying to move to things like solar power and wind power and other things that are renewable energy sources within our data centers and our campus. And then launching what we call AI for Earth. So not just AI for good, which is focused around using AI for good purposes, really thinking about AI for Earth, which is thinking about how can we leverage artificial intelligence to identify patterns and trends and other things to make the Earth better for all of us as well. And then continue work that we're doing within our state, but also extending beyond our borders into work we're doing together with China, who's, as folks know, a very large supplier to the US and others through manufacturing and other things, and making sure we're not just looking at this as a US focused effort. And then again, looking to get to 70% of renewable energy by 2023, which is 2 years from now. And then lastly, setting a goal that by 2030, which is only 9 years from now, that we will be carbon negative. So carbon negative is really the difference between being carbon neutral, which is not putting out any more waste than you're offsetting, to actually getting to the point where we're doing something where we're actually taking carbon out of the system, to the point that we actually have a goal that we want to, I think it's by 2030 or so, that we actually want to get to the point where we'll look at all of the carbon Microsoft has put out since 1975 or so, when we were formed as a company, and have actually removed that from and again, I'm not a scientist in this space, but I've actually kind of removed that from the environment, our environmental impact. So again, these are very big, bold, ambitious goals that Microsoft has just around sustainability. Does that make sense? Cool. And again, as you think about trends in careers and industries, these are places, whether you work at Microsoft or others, a lot of companies are looking at, and government agencies, how do we apply technology to solve these massive problems that we're seeing in the world. So we actually created a $1 billion climate innovation fund This is money that we're investing and donating over the course of 4 years to help to accelerate not just Microsoft, but innovation and investments that are being done in academics. So a lot of research that's being done with a lot of higher ed institutions, a lot of work that we're doing with our customers and our partners, but even some of the smaller companies that are a bit more agile. So we're trying to make investments in small businesses, not just with technology, but also money to kind of bootstrap them to help them with developing technology to solve some of these challenges. So this is a kind of a generation 1 data center, right? If you ever visited any of the, I think there's like 50 or so global data center regions, each data center is around the size of a US American football field. So at least 100 yards in length. These are just massive, massive facilities. You notice that in a lot of cases, we try to do things like have if we can, the compute power actually outdoors. That lowers some of the cooling costs to keep the data center cooler. But it's also, gotten us to thinking, what if we could do something that didn't require us to actually build data centers on land? What if we could take a data center, take the compute, take the storage, and actually submerge that into water? Could we actually take the data center and put it underwater? And Microsoft's been laying a lot of cable around the world on our own, as well as with partners like Facebook and others. I think we actually now have the number 2 or 3 largest amount of dark fiber that we've helped to lay globally to connect our data centers. So if we already have the fiber that's underwater, why not put a data center down there and connect that into the fiber that's underwater? So we introduced something we call Project Natick, which Satya calls Project Natick. I call it Natick because we live in Boston, and I call the city near us Natick. But Project Natick was really focused on this big, bold, ambitious goal of seeing if we could submerge an underwater data center that is totally self-contained. We drop these things underwater. Someone goes down there with a scuba suit, and they connect a couple of things. They connect power. They connect data, meaning you need some sort of connectivity to get the data in and out of the data center, and that's it. And we can just throw this thing underwater. We don't have to worry about really heating and cooling and other things because that's all self-contained. So this is an example of one of the experiments that we did, right? So John talked about the growth mindset and talked about kind of that. And really the fundamental part of that is this ability to take chances, to take risks, and potentially fail fast, right? So you think about all of what we're doing. We're no longer thinking about projects and software and services the old way we did, where we would build and ship products every 3 years. Everything's really based on an agile and iterative methodology, whether it's leveraging things like DevOps for building software and doing continuous integration, continuous development, through GitHub, which Microsoft owns now, and Microsoft actually is the largest open source provider with Git and GitHub, which we own. But it also comes down to how we innovate things around facility improvements and data center improvements. So in this case, this is actually a Microsoft data center that they actually submerged underwater in one of our first experiments. So we drop this underwater, you look at this thing, it goes down there, here it is floating, ultimately goes into water. And here's one of those connections that we're doing. And this is where we're bringing in the power, the compute, the power, the connectivity and all that to basically just connect that to the data center that got dropped down. And once that data center is there underwater, it really is true lights out operation. There's really no maintenance for years. And because it's underwater, again, it's consistently cool. So that saves on some of the cooling costs, as well as what we're doing by no longer have to emit kind of some of those gaseous things that we're doing for cooling, running air conditioning and chilling and all that. You don't have to do that when the entire data center is submerged underwater. Pretty cool, huh? I never thought that I would see a data center that looked like the aquarium, right? I haven't been to the aquarium in a few years with the kids, but this kind of looks to me like, and you go to the aquarium in Boston, right? And you'd see the diver with down there with the sharks and other things. This is just a data center that's basically dropped underwater, which looks like a tank. Yeah, so it's kind of a cool concept. So the next big trend beyond thinking about just sustainability is thinking about artificial intelligence. And Microsoft's vision around artificial intelligence is it's not humans versus computers, right? When I started doing computer science back in, 92 or so, I started computer science, and I was studying artificial intelligence, and we're doing simulations and modeling and all that. And the concept of AI has been around for a while, as Mark and John know, right? That this concept of computers doing things has been around for a long time. I remember growing up as a kid watching movies like war games, right, where we had the computers, and the computers are setting off a world war because the computers are doing bad things, and people worried about Big Brother in 1984 and all these things, right? So this idea around having massive amount of computers and computers being smart has been out there forever. But really, Microsoft's vision around artificial intelligence is how can we leverage AI to augment and extend what humans natively do well, right? It's not about computers replacing humans, but if there's opportunities for humans to be augmented by AI, if there's opportunities for us to automate repetitive and redundant tasks, if there's opportunities for us to use AI to improve safety, because humans get tired unlike computers, right? A human gets fatigued, a human gets tired, a human may not identify certain patterns as repeatable as a computer can because we get tired, and actually the failure rate for humans can sometimes be a little bit higher than the failure rate for computers. But when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, we have to think about it in an ethical way, right? So John mentioned, I think Brad Smith, who's our president and chief legal officer. If you get a chance, Brad wrote a book called Tools and Weapons. Really good book. I'll be honest, I didn't read it. I use an Audible book. So I had to go out for a walk and I listened to Brad's book, but it's read by Brad. And it's a really good book. And it talks about Microsoft's vision around artificial intelligence. And it talks about the need to have what we call a digital Geneva Convention, which is making sure that people are not using AI for inappropriate things. And it gets into things that we're doing with AI to make sure that there's no bias in the data set, right? We're training the AI models, that we're not just training them on people that look like me, 40-something-year-old white males, right? Making sure we have women included, people of color, people of different ages and ethnicities and other things that are being leveraged as part of the data set to build these AI models. Is a very, very key thing to us as part of what we call ethical AI, because we want to make sure the AI models are not being trained based on a very small data set that has implicit or explicit biases in the data set based on the data that we have, right? So John talked about diversity and inclusion. It's not just diversity and inclusion around hiring, more women and people of color and other things into Microsoft, which is certainly a key focus for us. It's diversity and inclusion in the data sets that we're using in the data models as well, to make sure that the computers are being built without implicit or explicit human biases based on the programmers and based on the data set we're using to train things as well. I think it's just key to our culture, and it's the core part of our culture as well.
Yeah, Chris, if I can add, the other thing I want you to think about is AI is everywhere, right? So Chris is talking on what I call the big blocks and things like that. But if you think about how you interact with some of their productivity tools and things like that day to day, maybe it's you're about to send an email, you want to put an attachment, and using AI to say, hey, John, we know the last few files you worked on were these. Is this what you want to send? Or if they know I'm collaborating with Chris in this, we start sharing knowledge and connecting others in the organization to that through some technologies that allow us to use AI to start thinking about that knowledge management and similar themes that others may be working on to bring them into the conversation. And maybe just playing back emails through things like Cortana and that. So there's a lot of different things that we build in that are what I'll call sort of snippets of AI, but make our life more, much better and more efficient as we work through our day-to-day activities.
Yeah, John, that's a great point. I know we're on a Zoom call here. Usually John and I are on Teams calls, and those Teams calls have built into them speech to text. So imagine people that have hearing impairments, which a number of folks do, either permanent or temporary disabilities, right? But permanent disability is someone that has a permanent loss of hearing. A temporary disability is what I often have is I have 4 kids, and if the kids are making a lot of noise in the background, I'll sometimes turn on captions in Netflix. So imagine I'm turning captions on inside of my meeting, or I'm building a transcript that's searchable later on. So we're taking a lot of these things and we're building them directly into the core platform. Another great example I use is I have a scanner sitting behind me. So many paper-based processes today are still being printed, and even with people being remote, they're being faxed around and other things. How do we digitize that content and then have a machine look through a purchase order and extract metadata? Who is that purchase order for? What's the amount? What are the terms of all that, and actually take that metadata out of the content and actually build a workflow to do some business process automation. So I'm glad you brought it back, John. So I'm kind of talking about very big, large, abstract things, but it's being applied more and more day to day into the tools that we all use every day. So we talked about artificial intelligence a little bit. The other big thing that's driving more and more AI is massive amounts of compute and storage. So if you think about training a computer, one of the reasons why AI hasn't taken off as fast as probably Mark and John and I thought it was going to, at least over the last 20, 30 years, is having the ability to have the amount of compute and storage to process the data. So if you're going to train a computer and you want it to be reasonably intelligent and have a reasonably high success rate, you have to give it a lot of data to train it on. So I use my kids as examples a lot. All right, I mentioned I have 4 daughters. When my daughters were learning how to walk and were learning how to do certain things, they learn largely through positive and negative examples. So positive example is they do something well, we reward them. So they know, hey, that was good. I'm going to keep doing more of that behavior because when I did that, my parents gave me a kiss, or they didn't yell at me, or they gave me a treat or something. When they did something bad, we would typically want to encourage them not to do that. So we'd give them negative reinforcement, right? We'd say, that's not a good behavior. We don't want you to keep doing that. No, don't hit your sister. No, don't throw that thing. Don't do whatever. So just like how we learn as humans through positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, we can do machine learning, but we can also do more and more machine teaching. A part of that is having the data and having humans going through and reviewing, this is right, this is wrong, and then over time teaching the computer enough that it has enough samples that it can then use the large amounts of compute and storage that it has to process over that. The third example is how do we then take AI, take the massive amounts of compute and storage we now have through the cloud, and think about all the sensors and all the data that we're now collecting, whether it's from our smartphones, from our smart cars, from whatever, then how do we improve the interaction between humans and computers? So John mentioned an example where maybe Cortana is reading things to me. Again, I have an iPhone, so maybe it's Siri. I have an Alexa device that I muted earlier because she keeps wanting to offer to help me, right? So how do I continue to think about how humans and computers are improving their interaction? And then lastly, it's what I mentioned before. It's really about that digital responsibility. It's making sure that we're using AI for good, that it's being done in an ethical way. It's being done in a way that we don't leave out any people, right? People within our country, people in other countries that may not have the same benefits and opportunities that we do. There's a lot that I take for granted living here in the Boston area, that when I talk to some of my colleagues outside of Boston, other parts of the US, other parts of the world, they may not have access to 5G, right? They may not have access to high-speed internet. They may not have access to a lot of the things that we just take for granted, or that I take for granted, because I've never lived anywhere other than the Boston area. So my view of the world is very limited in some respects because I've never lived anywhere other than Boston. So part of working at Microsoft, it's great because I get to meet and talk with customers and employees and others that come from a whole different diverse background as well. And then how do we use that to shape how we responsibly build and test our products? So where are things going, right? What is the future of AI? How many of you saw some of the commercials that we did? I think it was with Common. We showed some of the work we're doing with snow leopards. If folks seen any of our AI commercials where we were showing drones flying around, and this is an example of a snow leopard where we actually used AI to try to find all the snow leopards. It's kind of like when I was growing up, we had Where's Waldo? You get the picture. You have to look through other people and try and find Waldo. We did that with a computer. And one of the neat things that we do is Satya will talk about it. Like, we're not doing AI just so the computer can beat a human in a game. Yeah, it's really cool to see a computer beat someone on Jeopardy, or to see a computer beat someone in chess. We built computers that beat humans in Pac-Man. That's really cool. But back to John's point earlier, our goal at Microsoft is not just to be seen as cool. I mean, we like it, it's not bad, but really our goal is to try to make other companies and people cool. It's really trying to solve systemic problems, culturally, systemic problems like, cures to diseases. We've been doing a ton of work, as you probably have heard, around COVID and vaccine work and all that. That's really what we're focused on, because that to us is our core mission. And yeah, we still love Xbox, and we still have Minecraft, and we still have gaming, but really our core business is really trying to enable other companies and people to do cool things on our platform. And part of that was by using AI to identify and find things, whether it's, again, finding snow leopards to help make them less extinct, hopefully, but also what we're doing with smart cars and smart vehicles to improve safety and efficiency and all that. So Microsoft research. We have been doing a ton of research. John mentioned he was at IBM before. Microsoft has a significantly large amount of researchers. We actually have I think a significant number of worldwide patents. I forget how many we have patents compared to others, but I do know the last I heard, we've been making significant investment compared to others in the industry. We have 8 different Microsoft research labs globally. One of the ones you might have heard of is something in New England that we affectionately call the NERD. John was mentioning to me, Mark, I think you had one of our colleagues from the Nerd who I think she's also a former Bentley alum, and she works at the Nerd, I think on some of our endpoint management teams.
Anya, she came a few weeks
Yeah,
ago.
Anya did, yeah.
Yeah, right. So you think about it, right? We certainly have the sales and service and technology office that we have in Burlington, which is where John and I are based. But we also have a whole research and development center based in Cambridge, Mass, as well as Cambridge in the UK. So I often find it, that's what we call this one, Microsoft New England, not Microsoft Cambridge, because we already had a Cambridge research location in the UK. But what Microsoft Research in New England, and I kind of like the Nerd name anyways for the New England Research and Development Center, they're really doing a lot of cutting edge research, working with a lot of academic institutions, a lot of researchers and other things to incubate things. But we tore down the walls a couple of years ago with Satya, where we said, let's not just have researchers that are just doing research in a vacuum. One of the problems we had historically is we'd have researchers that were doing moonshot projects, and those are great to have people thinking about that. But how do we take some of those things and change them from being 5 to 10 years to get something to market? And by the time it gets to market, maybe the problems change. Maybe it's not even something we can do. How do we actually bring the researchers closer to the engineering teams? So we're trying to take things and still have long-term kind of moonshots and things like Project Natick that are out there, but see how can we actually shorten the cycle to get things from being an R&D concept to being something that we can ship in a product, and then very rapidly innovate and iterate over those things, right? So not thinking about these massive monolithic projects that took 3 to 5 to 10 years, but what is the minimal viable product that we can get out the door? And how do we use data and feedback to continue to iterate and make that better and better? So MSR is a key part of this. But if you think about things around getting parity between humans and machines, this is all just in the last 4 years, right? So you think about when we started to get into the business of doing cloud computing with Microsoft Azure. It started really for us around 10 years or so ago, right? I've been at Microsoft 13 years. Actually, even a little bit before I joined Microsoft 13 years ago, we had already started doing some research around cloud computing. And yes, there was emerging companies like Salesforce and Box and Dropbox and other ones that, commercialized things a little bit before us. We internally had already started to kind of get into some of this. But now that we actually have the data centers that are out there in the compute and storage, and we're collecting images and data and other things, in 2016, so about 5 years ago, we actually got to the point where we had object recognition parity between a human and a computer. So what that means is that a computer can look at an object, can look at a picture and detect what it is. I don't have time right now, but we showed yesterday during Microsoft Ignite, there was a really good 20-minute session if you get to watch it. They showed our AI technology for object recognition about a year ago compared to now. And a year ago, our AI would look at a picture and it said, it looks like a woman that's looking at something. Now it says it's a woman who has a smile on her face and she's doing whatever, or it would look at a picture and it would say, it looks like in the background, it's an orange sunset. But now what it says is it looks like there's a car in the foreground with 4 wheels that's doing whatever. So the computer's ability to not only interpret what the objects are, but to actually better interpret what the picture is, to get better intent, is really drastically increased. Same thing around looking at human speech parity, the ability for a computer to hear what we're saying and then play that back in text. The ability to do language translation, where I speak English and I speak English very quickly, the ability to have it slow me down, translate my speech into text, translate my text into another language for someone that may not speak English as their native language, right? The ability to go in and start to do more where we're reading a document and be able to actually look at a document, look at a Word document and get the gist of what the document's about. This document looks like it's a resume. This document looks like it's a purchase order. This document looks like it has X, Y, Z. Those are things that humans have been doing for a long time that a computer couldn't really do well. But a computer could read a document and understand what the words are and translate text to text, but it couldn't really understand what the intent of the document was. It couldn't synthesize a 10-page document to give you the summary of what it was without just typically extracting the first paragraph and hoping the first paragraph of the document was actually accurate. So these are all things that have really been happening over the last 4 or 5 years.
Hey, Chris, I was just looking at time. Maybe we should open it up we've done a lot of talking.
Yeah.
But open it up. I just want to make a couple comments and then open up for questions. I want to sort of make this real, right? So when we talk to customers, Chris and I have customer-facing roles. So all this cool stuff Chris is talking about, our job is to try to take this and align it to whatever business problems, challenges they have, right? To be productive.
John, before we do that, because I know I just breezed through the 3 or 4 slides that were there. I did want to show this quick video before we did that, because I think this synthesizes stuff.
Okay.
Is that okay? And then we still have Mark like 15 minutes or so left on our time. Is that still
Yeah,
accurate?
you have about 15 minutes, 10, 15
Okay,
minutes.
perfect. Just want to make sure. So yeah, so I just breezed through, and I'm not going to go back through them right now because I agree with you, John. So, you know, the key themes, and I'll share that quick video, and then I save 15 minutes on the back end for the Q&A. Is, as I mentioned, ubiquitous computing everywhere, in the cloud, on the edge. And this is a picture of an arena or data center, whatever. Sustainability with those underwater data centers, moving beyond just silicone. And one of the really neat announcements that we made yesterday, and this is a quick 2-minute video, and this is the last thing before we have kind of the open discussion and talk about the careers, is something that I'm really excited about that we just announced yesterday. So I wanted you all to get to see this. I was showing my kids this morning, and it was really, really cool. It's something that we call Microsoft Mesh. And Microsoft Mesh is bringing together the work we've been doing over the past N number of years around things like Microsoft Connect, Microsoft HoloLens, things that you saw when you were at our technology centers in the past, but also the things that we've learned over the past year working remotely as we begin to return to work, return to the office, things that we think are going to influence how we all continue to work for the next few years. So I want to just roll this video real quick, and then to John's point, we'll take some questions and talk about careers in our last 15 minutes together.
Connection is a spark that gives our lives meaning. It drives us to seek out others who feel the same way.
Okay, why don't you input the data and we'll take a look together. Hey Mari, what you got for me?
To find those who share our views, yet offer different perspectives.
So this net. Look over here.
Challenge us with new ways of seeing.
That I think we should.
Deepen our understanding. And enrich our lives.
最后一笔的时候，往前。
Great things happen when we commit to something bigger than ourselves.
Let's take a closer look at it.
Place this here. Let's see how we go from there, okay?
This sense of collaboration and the feelings of connection it brings excites us.
Hey, just in time. I'm gonna move it slightly, okay?
It's yours, take it.
We have 2 planes right now on the same trajectory.
As we put people first, technology fades into the background and feels like anything but.
Aisha, what do you think?
I think if we had 330, maintaining 2800,
We'll be clear for approach.
Excellent.
This changes the way we see the world, and in turn, changes the world we see.
These numbers are looking great, actually.
There's promise in the possibilities, and what we see and create next will stretch the imagination.
Good morning, Sarah.
Morning.
Slowly coming towards the thumb.
A world without boundaries.
Good job. A lot better than yesterday.
Yeah.
Excellent. Slowly bring the
A
arm
world
down.
where technology enhances, not limits, humanity. With people front, center, and in the spotlight. The future is here. And here can be anywhere. Introducing Microsoft Mesh.
So the cool thing with Mesh is it's not just about Microsoft HoloLens devices, which, yes, you saw some of them there, but it's also working with Oculus Rift and other things that are not Microsoft technology. What really Mesh is doing is Mesh, if you think about Xbox, if you're a gamer playing Xbox Live, and how Xbox Live enabled us to connect gamers across different things, and the work that we're doing with Xbox cross-platform to let you play Minecraft as an example, or any game between an Xbox and a Nintendo and a PS1, and it doesn't matter what the endpoint is. Mesh is letting us do the same thing with augmented and virtual reality, whether it be, again, someone that's walking around, someone joining a Teams meeting, someone doing things with a physician, as you saw the girl doing at the end for physical therapy. It's really us taking a lot of the Lego blocks that we've had in our platform for the last 5 to 10 years and actually offering that as a service. And one of the things I showed yesterday at Ignite was, again, folks like that built Cirque du Soleil and other things actually leveraging this technology to build new categories of applications and games and experiences that humans can use. So with that, John, I think we've got about 15 minutes for questions, and we can talk about careers and stuff like that. So open the floor.
Thanks, guys. Who would like to either ask a question or tell us something that you learned from John and Chris that you hadn't heard about before? Cheryl.
I can start. So first of all, thank you guys so much for giving us this like helpful session. And I guess what I learned from it is that like before this session, when I thought about like Microsoft, I guess compatibility and user-friendly are the two words that came into my mind. So like, I guess your presentation just like reinforced my understanding. And I feel like it's really a company that cares about the customers and trying to be like inclusive and diversified from different angles, whether it's like the data center and the water for like sustainability or like the ethics in AI, and also like Microsoft really cares about like disability in like the Xbox ads. So I guess it's, you guys just make me like more like make Microsoft like a better company in my mind. So like my question would, because like I have applied for, I think I've applied to the technology consultant role last year, and I haven't heard back from them, so I guess I was not like selected. So I'm wondering like what are the skills that I should prioritize in my application, and like what are the important values that Microsoft is looking for on the candidates?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the role. So each of them is certainly different with what they expect, but Microsoft honestly can be challenging to apply into, just because it's such a large company, and honestly sometimes things, I don't know if they make their way to the hiring manager. So sure, what I can do, and I've done this with other Bentley alum and graduates and students, is if you want to shoot me a note on the particular job that you're applying for, I can actually look up the hiring manager. Again, I unfortunately can't make a reference for you because I don't know you personally, but I can kind of look through who the people are, and I can give you some coaching on what is the role. And then there's a ton of things that we've put out there from a career development perspective. Microsoft owns LinkedIn as well, and we own a platform called LinkedIn Learning as part of it. We've actually built career profiles and learning journey maps, as well as technical certifications that say if your aspiration is to do something with Azure or Power Platform or whatever, here are the certifications we think you should get as part of what we call the Technical Skills Initiative that we do internally as well as externally. And then here's the free training from Microsoft you can take to get those skills. And often having those certifications in advance help give you a leg up with the hiring manager. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And the other thing, Cheryl, and the rest of the group, I would say, is a couple of things. One is, in general, we hire a lot of people with all types of background, right? No, not just a technical background. And so, if there's areas of interest or passions and things like that, I'd always suggest thinking about gaining some of those experiences as well. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We hire nurses, we hire doctors, we hire people that come from the finance industry, right? I work day to day with people that were senior nurses to some of the largest providers in the country. And the reason we do that is that gives us more insight and more knowledge on what they're up against. So from being a technologist, I can only go so far, but if I'm working with a person that actually does the work and knows what happens in an ER or knows what happens in a patient's room, and like their day-to-day experiences, they bring a lot more insight that can help us think through what we're building. So I say that as you're thinking about your career, is going back to that bridging of technical expertise to some other areas. We're always looking for those people as well. So if there's things that you think distinguish yourself differently, going back to your elevator pitch, right? And then things that make you different than others, I greatly highlight those things when you're applying. The other thing, Chris said that, for those of you who have heard me talk before, you can link into me. I would love to engage with you guys. I have only two rules. Number one is I don't give you my LinkedIn. You've gone through some of the career development stuff, so you should be able to get to me. And Mark, if you have a hard time, then go to Mark and he can get to. But then let me know, use this as a practice experience, right? Let me know who you are and why I should connect to you. Don't just send me a note that says, hey, John, I want to connect to you, right? Say, hey, John, we're part of this session. I'm this student at Bentley. Here's what I'm looking at. And I'll love to connect. So all those things that you've learned with the career development team, I want to just re-emphasize as we engage in the discussions.
Yeah, and I did put these slides up here. There are sites, if you're looking at full-time jobs at Microsoft, if you're further in your learning journey, but there's also a page that's dedicated to students in internships. So we are still doing internships even during COVID that include remote and virtual internships. In the Nerd Center in Cambridge is still looking for people to be interns if you want to join Microsoft during a break in school as well.
Oh, thank you. Matt House. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Mark. So actually, I went to the MTC Microsoft last year. I was a freshman, and that's where I met John. I don't know if you remember. My hair was much shorter.
My hair wasn't gray, so it's okay. Oh, maybe it was. I do recognize. I recognize a few of the faces on this call.
I'm glad.
You guys have groupies. What can I tell you?
Wait, what was that?
I said, John and Chris have groupies. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
Tell my
and
kids
there's Bob
that.
still. I haven't seen Bob, so.
Yeah, no, Bob's still with us. He's at home, but he's still with us.
It's good to hear. So one thing I actually really enjoyed going to MTC as a freshman was most of the healthcare industry, the Microsoft involvement with the healthcare industry. So I remember, John, you talking about Puro and the facial recognition in hospitals and seeing what doctors would use most, the hand sanitizers and the HoloLens with the, I think at the time it was like a body, and we could see how surgeons would use the HoloLens, and now with the physical therapy with Microsoft Mesh. And I wanted to ask you, since you work so closely with the healthcare industry, this past year with COVID, have you seen any, I mean, with the exception of the Microsoft Mesh, the physical therapy that we just saw in the video, were there any things that innovative features or or maybe even hackathon projects that took place this past year during COVID?
Well, so it's a great question. And I almost go from the basics on up, right? Because in healthcare, was not like a lot of different industries, the first thing was remote work, right? So when you think about a lot of the healthcare industry, there's the frontline workers that we all saw in the news, and we had to help them with COVID response. And we provided a lot of technology helping them, and we continue to do that through the vaccination programs and things like that. But a lot of it was a lot of these organizations weren't equipped to work from home because they really typically had never done it before. They never thought they would need to do it. So we've had a lot of conversations with, and I just call it the basics because I think everybody on this call, being on a Zoom call or that, experiences that. But a lot of our customers, our end users, haven't had to work through those experiences. So there was a lot of that. There's been a lot of innovation, helping organizations get the testing out, think about as they go into a hybrid work environment. So that the funny thing is people start saying return to work. A lot of people never stop working. They just working from different locations, right? So now it's how to return, like you guys will return to school, campus, right? You've been learning through this process, but now it's back to campus. We're working with organizations, how they return to their work site. And some of that is innovation around testing and forms and information being shared to make sure that everybody's safe. And some of it is, through simple things like in Teams, they're going to put restrictions on how many people can be in a conference room. So there's going to be capabilities, like Chris was talking about some of the AI, that I may walk into a conference room and it will detect my phone and say, wait, you're the seventh person in a room that's out. You're really only supposed to have 6 people in it. You may not want to be in this room. So there's a lot of technology that we're working with the customers on now to help support that, effort over the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add too is I've done a lot of hacks with customers But we've also have done what we call the Nurse Hack for Health. So we done those in partnership with Johnson & Johnson and Sunsail. We did 2 of them already. One at the start of the pandemic last spring, one in the fall. We're actually doing our 3rd one this May. So if you're interested, it brings in nurses and other healthcare practitioners, but there's Microsoft folks, and we're always looking for developers, and it's a worldwide event. It's all volunteer. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in May. And you're welcome to register on this website if you're interested in joining us.
Jen, you got the last question of the day. I think.
Yeah, my question was a bit along the lines of COVID-19. That's why I put the hand down. But I guess I was trying to think of another question to maybe ask. But I guess I can ask in the lines of, so you talked a lot about sustainability and these goals that Microsoft has for the future, as well as that are currently enacted. And I guess I would like to ask, in your roles, how do you think you contributed to these goals?
So I'll talk about my role particularly. We have customers that come into the MTC that one of their goals is around sustainability. They have initiatives that are board level initiatives to improve their sustainability as customers. So part of what I do is with my peers, we actually work with customers to figure out how can they do things to be more efficient. Another big thing that I've done is I help a number of customers architect and move solutions from their on-premises data centers, which may not be as efficient, into the Microsoft Cloud, or once it's in our data center, all of the work that we're doing to improve our impact is directly benefiting them by removing what they're doing on premises and putting that into Microsoft's cloud. So those are 2 examples of things that I'm doing personally, John.
Yeah, no, I think I would echo that. It's working with our customers, going through a lot of this sustainability, especially. I think it, as an individual within the company, I think it's changed a little bit where I'm working from home. But day to day, I'm working with customers on array of topics, and sustainability is one of the top ones.
Yeah, another big one we're seeing, and again, this is probably a trend that will continue post-COVID, is reducing travel. And travel, as you know, planes, trains, automobiles tend to emit a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. So a lot of customers are saying, can we reduce our carbon footprint by minimizing non-essential travel? Partly today it's happened because of COVID, but now can we reduce conferences and some of the things that maybe we don't need to travel for, and that will have a positive impact on the environment as well.
The last thing I'll close out with is not necessarily sustainability. I don't think Chris and I talked a lot about, but some of the basic things that we continue to talk to customers about that I know that there's you guys are studying and there's interest in is around the analytics. That is one of the #1 topics that we're always talking about, how we get those data insights to people at the front lines. Security is not a given, right? Especially as we work in these new environments. So we're working constantly. I mean, I'd almost say 60% of my conversations around helping organizations get a better security posture and helping enable their workers. And then, as Chris talked about, the intelligent edge, right? How we help customers think about cloud computing and all of that, and enable that stuff. So those are some of the really, really big topics that we consistently are talking to our customers about.
Yeah, especially after the SolarWinds hack and some of the other things going on with different elections and what have you, and nation states attacking companies.
Nolan, do you have a last word for us?
No, thank you so much for the presentation.
Okay, you are welcome, and thank you all for coming. If I can share my screen for 1 sec, I'm going to take that off because I want to let you know that next week we're taking the week off because it's a bonus day at Bentley, so there's no school, but on Wednesdays. But on March 17th, we have 2 speakers coming in. We have Max Shu from Kayak. Max was a tutor in the CIS Sandbox until I think about 3 or 4 years ago. And Sajan Park, who is a senior analyst at McKinsey, will also be in this on the screen at this time on March 17th. So please come back for the next one. I'll send that email about that. And a quick hello to Janet L., who's the director of the Pulse for Career Services Center at Bentley, who reminds us that you can use LinkedIn Learning for free here at Bentley and take advantage of all the services they offer there. So thanks everybody for joining us, and see you back
John,
here.
hi Chris. I just want to say a quick hi. Hi everybody
Yeah,
else.
good to see
Hi
you.
Alice.
Hello.
Yeah, you as students, you do have access to LinkedIn Learning for free. I think you see it in your workday, but I sent an email to HR. So if you can't find it, reach out to me or Mark can get you in touch with me and I'll figure out how you have access to it. But it is free to Bentley students. It's got some great stuff in it too. As I forget, Chris or John brought it up, but there's a lot of self-training you can do in there. So, upskill or some things are just for fun.
Hey, we use it too. So it's a real valuable asset.
Great presentation. I can't believe we store things in the ocean. I learned a lot today. Holy moly.
Hey, hopefully the next time we can all be together. We'll have you guys back up to Burlington.
We want to take us to the ocean.
Guys.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we don't know where in the ocean. I don't know if it's warm or cold where it is, but
okay.
Hopefully it's in the Caribbean.
We'll sail for Burlington.
There we go.
It's off the Cape.
Exactly. Well, thanks again for the invitation.
You bet. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Paul. Thanks,
Right,
Mark.
take care, guys. Enjoy the
Bye-bye.
conversation.